Turkish soldiers training Somali troops. This base in Somalia is Turkey's largest overseas. It's just one example of Turkey's growing global ambitions.
Turkey is bigger than Turkey.
Turkey is at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. So how does Turkey use this unique position to its advantage? And what are the limits of its strategy? A bridge between East and West. In Turkey, it's not just a metaphor. Here in Istanbul, this bridge spanning the Bosphorus Strait literally connects Europe and Asia. And Turkey is connected to multiple different regions. It borders the European Union. To its north, across the Black Sea, are Ukraine and Russia. It neighbours the South Caucasus and countries in the Middle East. And via the Mediterranean, it's also connected to North Africa.
Because of neighboring different regions, you have to keep a balance between this interest of regional actors.
Mustafa Aydin is a professor of international relations at Kadir Has University in Istanbul.
Many countries from outside Turkey also now seem to accept Turkey's position as a balancing actor. It has kind of become a characteristic of its foreign policy.
That's become increasingly the case under Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his party, AKP. Erdogan became Turkey's prime minister after a 2002 election victory. And he's still in power, now as president. Erdogan is accused of using the courts more and more to suppress the opposition. And Turkish authorities have repeatedly cracked down on protests. But we're focusing on his foreign policy.
We neither turn our backs on the East for the West, nor neglect the West for the East. With this understanding, we have taken historic steps to expand Turkey's sphere of influence.
Under Erdogan, Turkey is both providing weapons to Ukraine and refusing to join sanctions against Russia. Turkey's a member of NATO and is hosting US and other NATO soldiers. But last year, it also asked to join BRICS, the economic and political bloc dominated by China. So Turkey's charting its own course. That's known as strategic autonomy.
Turkey is actually entrenched in the Western institutions, but at the same time, Ankara wants to have a big room of maneuver within its foreign policy approach.
Hürcan Aslı Aksoy is head of the Center for Applied Turkey Studies in Berlin, which is co-funded by the German Foreign Office.
Turkey sees itself also, as an important middle power.
Beyond its unique geography, Turkey has a young population of 85 million, strong industry, and the second largest army in NATO after the US, with over 350,000 active personnel. So how is Turkey building its status globally? We'll look at how it works with and competes with other powers across the South Caucasus and Central Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And that's where we're heading now. To its southeast, Turkey borders Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Recent power shifts here have left Turkey with both challenges and opportunities. Like in Syria, where Turkey and Iran have been competing for influence. They backed opposing groups in Syria's civil war. Turkey supported the fight against Bashar al-Assad's regime, backing various rebel groups. While Iran and Russia supported Assad. But in the last 2 years, Iran and its network of allies have suffered significant blows, especially from Israel. And Russia's been focusing on its war in Ukraine. So, in late 2024, Turkish-backed rebels seized the opportunity and launched an offensive, finally toppling Assad's regime.
The Assad regime collapsed. This kind of opened up an opportunity for Turkey.
Now Erdogan's capitalizing on his past support for Syria's new leader. Turkey would reportedly like to take over these two strategic airfields, which were abandoned by Russian and Iranian forces. However, Israel is aiming to limit Turkey's influence in Syria. Israel has recently bombed these two airfields, like here at Tias, where Israeli strikes left the runway destroyed.
Turkey becomes more powerful, but at the same time it sees its own limitations because Israel is extremely assertive.
Turkey and Israel are increasingly at odds, especially over Israel's war in Gaza. And when it comes to Iran, Turkey prioritizes stability.
Turks and Iranians, they have traditionally and historically had always this competition, but also neighborly relations. It didn't change. So Turkey will be not very happy of and completely destroyed Iran either.
But Turkey's not just tackling tricky neighbors. The Turkish economy has crumbled. Extreme inflation has made life in Turkey far more expensive. And abroad, Turkey has to dial down its ambitions.
One example is Syria. Syria is in need of huge support, international support for reconstruction. Turkey is well positioned to do that. A neighboring country with a huge construction sector. But one thing that is missing is the capital. Who is going to put that huge amount of money into Syria? Turkey doesn't have that.
That lack of funds is one reason Turkey's aligning itself with wealthy Gulf countries, like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar.
The region's balance is kind of shifting to the Gulf. Turkey is trying to have regional solutions for regional problems. While doing that, who is going to pay for it? The Gulf.
Turkey and Qatar have long had strong relations. The two have a joint military base in Doha with Turkish soldiers and aircraft. This base is one place where, despite financial limitations, Turkey is leveraging its military muscle and seeking cooperation to grow its influence in the Middle East. Turkey has also set out to become a key player in Africa. When Erdogan came to power, Turkey had embassies in only 12 African countries. Now, it has more than 3 times as many.
First, it opens consulates and embassies. Then Turkish Airlines starts to fly those destinations. And then trade and investments are expanding. Then development and humanitarian aid is going there. Infrastructure and logistic development. So you see a whole package.
Turkish companies have specialized in building airports and other infrastructure in Africa. And Turkey is building mosques across the continent.
And then in the last 5 years, of course, in parallel with the expanding military industry in Turkey, you see also more and more military and security component.
That's at the heart of Turkey's relations with Somalia in the Horn of Africa. Back in 2011, with Somalia hit by famine and civil war, Erdogan was the first leader from outside Africa to visit the country in 20 years. In 2017, Turkey opened this military base in Somalia's capital Mogadishu, where it trains Somali troops and reportedly has 2,000 soldiers. Turkey and Somalia are on either side of a major trade route from the Indian Ocean via the Red Sea and the Suez Canal all the way to the Mediterranean. Right in the middle of the route, on the coast of Sudan, Turkey has leased this island, Suakin. This abandoned island was once an important port city. Now Turkey's planning to build new maritime infrastructure here. And in Somalia, Turkey recently committed to building up the country's navy and helping protect its coastline. Turkey's also started searching for oil and gas in Somali waters. A key part of Turkey's offer to African states is military hardware. Turkish-made weapons like Bayraktar drones are selling well in Africa.
Turkish products, defensive products, are they are cheaper, and Turkey has put much less conditions on its defense exports than many other countries, such as the United States, for example.
Turkey's diplomatic rhetoric also seems to appeal to African partners. It stresses the country's lack of colonial past and respecting African solutions to African problems. In the South Caucasus, Turkey has a special partnership with Azerbaijan. And in Central Asia, Turkey's also forging closer ties, especially in Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. The majority of their populations belong to the Turkic ethnic group and speak Turkic languages. They were all part of the Soviet Union, and they have close ties to Russia. But that is changing.
Because Russia has to focus on the war in Ukraine and have shifted its attention to the West, it allows Turkey to be more active.
Turkey and Azerbaijan often call themselves brothers, or one nation, two states. Turkish weapons and support helped Azerbaijan win its conflict with Armenia. In Central Asia, Turkey's also boosting military cooperation. It's strengthening cultural ties, like by financing mosques, and fostering economic links.
Turkey has been very careful not to alienate Russia either, because Russia is here. When the war ends, it might come back and realign the balances in the region again.
By navigating competition, Turkey shows how a middle power can expand its influence.
Whenever Turkey dials back and uses a better rhetoric of cooperation, development, working together, then the regional perceptions open up to Turkey.
Turkey's growing importance could explain why its Western allies are largely turning a blind eye to